Back in my long-form Metroid series analysis, I understand that I said some fairly inflammatory things about a relatively well-liked entry, Metroid Fusion. And while I understand that many hold Fusion up alongside Super and Zero Mission, I just really wanted to hurt their feelings. Like it made me really happy to just make people cry. In all seriousness, I was really harsh towards Fusion in my long-form video. I tried to be a little bit self-aware about it, but I honestly couldn't bring myself to respect a game designed with such a fundamental mismatch between its storytelling style and the series' signature Metroidvania gameplay. It always felt like the devs created an entire Metroidvania world and then bogged it down with mandatory story content and guardrails. Almost like you could just disable the bullshit and suddenly it would feel perfectly fine as a Metroid game. It was pretty frustrating for me in particular. However, there are still aspects to Fusion I'm fond of, and over time I kept getting reminded of them. I'd been watching reviews of retro handheld consoles, knowing I probably didn't need one, but secretly hoping I could be convinced to buy one, when I just got this itch for the classic GBA aesthetic. For whatever reason, I craved that atomic translucent purple, and I thought about how cool Fusion would look on one of these. Whether I like it or not, Fusion really does represent part of the spirit and identity of the GBA. Its low-temperature aesthetic and amazing soundtrack are iconic to some degree, and that classic atomic purple does bring me back to those unique Fusion soup colors. As I said before in my long-form video, I replayed Fusion many times over the years. Not because of its story, mind you, since I habitually skipped all its dialogue, but there is some latent quality of Fusion that kept me coming back. I had no idea what it was though, so I just took some notes and left them alone for the time being. Weeks later, I was watching the Vinesauce multiplayer stream of Mario 64 B3313 when the guys started talking about randomizers.
Here. I want to get into Wind Waker I've only ever really done Ocarina of Time randomizers. And I want to learn more randomizers.
Wind Waker's a fun one.
Wind Waker randomizer, I play like once every 3 months. But it's interesting because like it's just two completely different experiences. The other way, same. Right? Like if you just try to play a randomizer casually and just remember your base knowledge of the game, it's pretty cool. But then when you know how to speed run the game, it's incredible what they can do. They just break the randomizer's logic in half and get stuff early.
There's a lot of great
automatic
tools.
ones now, which are like I know
I had the
Majora's
automatic
Mask
one
and
last time I did it.
Automatic ones.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like it just keeps track in real time of everything. I did Majora, I did Wind Waker, I do Zelda 2 every year randomizer. No, so here's the thing. I Zelda 2 is a game I played many times. I don't think it sucks. I think it's it's undercooked and
Damn.
But it's the randomizer's fun. It makes the game a little more fun in a couple ways, but also makes it harder in other ways. But it's definitely worth trying, especially because for me, I played the game. I know Hyrule in that game very well.
That's always the measurement of how much fun a rando is if you know the game really well.
It's true, but the one I play usually is level. It randomizes all of Hyrule, and it is frustrating as fuck. But when you finally find, say, if you get the hammer, like as your first item, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's like that feeling is unreplicable. Unreplicable.
Unreplicable.
Unreplicable.
Till now, I had assumed randomizers were just a weird niche thing that didn't appeal to me, like how I never really had an interest in playing hardcore ROM hacks for speedrunners. But when they mentioned how your enjoyment of randomizers is determined by your familiarity with a game, suddenly the concept clicked for me. This was a way to reinvigorate a game after your replays of it rendered it dull. It was a way to play your favorite games for the first time again. So I started researching randomizers to see what other people thought of them, and I came across this idea of a multi-game randomizer. This not only reinvigorated your old games, but it made them part of a greater experience which could be played by multiple people using different skill sets. My YouTube research led me to this project called Archipelago.
Tim, did you just call me in here to test audience your video just to call it an archipelago?
Its compatibility list is staggering. Elsewhere, I even found a randomizer specifically designed for the Prime games AM2R and Cave Story. This was randomizers on crack. I knew I would enjoy this concept so much, but I also was very apprehensive. It just felt a little too hedonistic. Like your attention can't be held by just one game, so you want to mash all your favorite games together. I didn't know how to feel about this, so I thought I might try randomizers in a more isolated context. I needed to test it on a game whose vanilla experience was familiar to me, but not one that I adored enough to ruin it. One that could still take advantage of a randomizer. What better guinea pig could I possibly have than Fusion? So I got the Metroid Fusion Open Randomizer and started messing around with it. On top of randomizing the pickups, it removes all dialogue and scripted events and unlocks all doors except for the colored ones. There were a few options for customization, but before I messed with those, I tried playing the ROM with no randomization just to see how Fusion feels without its story content. Holy shit, it's fixed! Oh my god! Oh my god! The ROM does leave you with a basic introduction from Adam, letting you know your overall goals in the game. It's short and sweet, and kinda reminds me of the Prime 1 and 2 intros, actually. You know the parts where it says, investigate the distress signal, or find the missing troops, and then your adventure just begins from there. It makes you feel like you're trusted to do your job properly, and like the game acknowledges your competence. Throughout the game, you're still doing the same things and killing the same bosses as before, but without the micromanaging, it feels like you're doing them because you want to, not just because they're on your boss's checklist. Your actions are now directly tied to your progress, and so you're allowed to do something like ignore one of Sector 1's atmospheric stabilizers and continue on your way. At any point in time, you can just stop what you're doing and go anywhere else in the BSL, assuming you have the capabilities. As I played the game this way, I started to notice some things. Specifically, I started to realize some things about my previous criticisms of Fusion. Let me clarify. Over the past several months, I've become personally aware of a bias within me. When I feel that a Metroid game betrays the identity of the series, or betrays the genre it pioneered and embodied, it tends to taint everything else in the experience. I naturally tend to view every aspect of the game in light of that betrayal. It causes me to pick apart secondary and tertiary aspects because my annoyance is all-encompassing. What has lately helped me narrow my criticisms to proper scale has been to perform a thought experiment. I asked myself, if the game had proper exploration and backtracking, would I still hate this little detail I'm complaining about? Alternatively, I can ask, if this little detail were fixed, would I now be happy with the game? A lot of times the answer is no, but sometimes the answer is yes. This is how I came to understand that my main problem with Dread is the portrayal of Samus and the Chozo, and following that is the game's lack of genuine backtracking on the main path. Back to Fusion, in my long-form video, I had dished out criticism on the basis of the game's art style. While I do think both Fusion and Zero Mission lack the dynamic range of their SNES predecessor, I can't say I'm constantly seething about it while I play. I actually hardly notice it. Not that I ever blame them for this issue, but I know a lot of games suffer from a washed-out look.
In this Game Boy port of Super Mario World, we bring you the reanimated corpse of Mario.
The GBA library in general just has poor dynamic range, and while you must acknowledge that, it doesn't go so far as to make the games unplayable or unenjoyable. Just don't ever expect me to choose it over the SNES. Real quickly, I also wanted to touch on the idea of Fusion's art style being designed with artificiality in mind. Of course, there's nothing wrong with the way that the art style is done per se, but as per my bias, the art style in combination with the restrictive gameplay made me really view the art style in a negative way, because it just so seemingly perfectly communicated the message of Fusion not letting you do what Super Metroid let you do. So the other criticism I wanted to revisit is that of Fusion's horror aspects. At first, I thought the reason I wasn't scared of Fusion was because of a failure in its design. But now I'm starting to think I've just lost the ability to be scared by any side-scroller anymore. And I don't mean I can't get a sense of eeriness or spooky mysteriousness, but just that no side-scroller can ever evoke the visceral fear I feel in games like Visage or Scorn. with side-scrollers, the action is just so distant from you, and the perspective is so abstract it fails to evoke a sense of immediate danger. You're basically omniscient from this perspective since you can see both in front of and behind the player. Now look, I'm not saying I need Fusion to be scary. I never needed it to be a quote-unquote horror game TM. My main issue with Fusion is, and continues to be its restrictive and infantilizing game design. So, in the spirit of remedying that, let's talk some more about that randomizer. The unrandomized M4 experience is fine and all. In fact, if you ask me, this is Fusion as God intended. But it has a fatal issue in that the removal of the scripted events introduces an insurmountable soft lock not long after you enter Sector 6. You see, normally in this room you'd have the SAX waltzing through and blowing up all the powerbomb blocks. But since she's chilling at the top of the main deck, we get no such luck. So you gotta randomize if you want any chance of beating this version of the game. Let's start over with a new seed. Your main objective, rather than being to
find out what's going on, I guess,
is specifically to unlock the red doors, obtain the charge and plasma beams, and make it back to the top floor. The game doesn't necessarily care how you go about doing that. As the items are in random spots, you often find late game ones earlier than expected. This also means you might find some early game items much later than expected. As a result, I was forced to approach the game in a completely different way than before. And due to the randomness, I found myself getting jazzed about any significant breakthrough. Anytime I got a needed upgrade, discovered a new route, or got some crazy ice missile or wall jump skip, it felt like I was experiencing a new game. The particular seed that I generated had me going in a weird order for the route. It gave me some late game abilities right away, like the gravity suit and the wave beam, but some earlier abilities were missing. This meant I had to be strategic about where I went in order to avoid the soft locks. So I had to save basically only if I was absolutely certain that I wouldn't get soft locked. For the longest time I didn't have the high jump, so I had to many times just freeze enemies and use wall jumps to get up to higher spots. But because I had the early wave beam, it did enable me to free the animals pretty early on in the game. A cool aspect of this seed is that I had to enter a lot of areas backwards. So I had to go backwards into Sector 4's deep area using the diffusion missiles that I got early. But that didn't really lead to much. Later on, I went back through Sector 2 to get into the maintenance area, which required me to do this crazy wall jump maneuver. And what's cool about this hack is that if you get the screw attack, you can actually wall jump just like you can in any other 2D Metroid, which is cool. And I also went backwards into Nightmare's chamber, which was pretty unexpected. I backtracked into Ridley's lair through Sector 1, yeah, which almost led to a soft lock if I wasn't able to do this crazy skip, crazy maneuver with the diffusion missiles. I had to watch for the specific animation cue of the space pirate that's about to jump across the gap. And then as soon as I saw that animation cue, I had to hit the wall with the diffusion missile so that the resulting, like, spread shot of ice beam would hit him, and then it would allow me to use him as a platform to get up. And it took a good, like, 5 to 10 minutes to get that to work. What last notable thing about my playthrough is when I finally got to the Omega Metroid, it was a lot more difficult than usual because I hadn't got the wide beam. I think that was the only one I was missing, the wide beam, and that meant I did a lot less damage than normal. So I had to do a lot of dodging of the Omega Metroid's claws. But yeah, after that, I beat the game, and it was actually really satisfying to get through this randomizer. So this experience opened Fusion up to allow me to think about the entire game world at once. Rather than doing some task put right in front of me, I was constantly re-evaluating my options with regards to what items I had in my loadout. This randomizer allowed me to experience fusion in a way that was previously only a dream of mine. So if randomizers are so good, even so good that they can turn the most linear game into that kind of Metroidvania, I should just be chomping at the bit to throw randomizers at all my favorites, right? Well, I've had a number of hang-ups I've been working through. See, I don't want the vanilla experience of these games to become just another seed. It feels like I'd be devaluing the default configuration by adding more. For similar reasons, I've actually tended to stay away from the roguelike genre. In these games, the fact that the game world is constantly shuffling around leaves me without a sense of meaning or purpose to any of it. Why should I care about this game world if it's just deleted when I die? So my fear is that the vanilla experiences will feel less meaningful with other configurations available. I fear they'll stop feeling like the definitive versions, thus requiring me to play the randomized versions to feel any enjoyment at all. Although, thing is, that's basically already happening with sequence breaking and speedrun routes. Does early power bombs really ruin the default route in Super Metroid? And do BLJs render the entirety of Mario 64 meaningless? Obviously not. And also, modding is a thing. Plenty of mod creators offer alternative or enhanced versions of my favorite games. Hell, let's throw Prime Remastered into the mix. I still play the original versions of all these games. I am still 100% down for Minecraft on consoles. Maybe I really am just trying to cope with the tragedy of familiarity. Every time I replay a game, it only further familiarizes me with it. I think we're all just chasing that original high we got from our first playthroughs back in the day. Some of us turn to randomizers while others use the avoidance strategy, basically letting enough time pass between playthroughs that you hope you forget most of the game. The problem with that is that strategy becomes less and less effective with each playthrough. The upside is you experience the entire game on its own terms each time. You get the full range of the title. So in that light, another fear I have is that focusing on randomization will necessarily turn your favorite game into an arcade-like experience. You'll become so fixated on the mechanics and challenge that the actual meaningful content of the game, like the story and end goals, falls by the wayside. But isn't that the point of it all? The fact that you've spent so much time replaying the game that you've memorized all of that meaningful content? The fact that you're looking for a little bit of refreshed gameplay which revitalizes the atmosphere of the game in a new context. The odds are, even if my fear proves true, by the time you've exhausted yourself with the randomizer, playing the game in its original context will feel refreshing again anyway. Growing up on the internet, I don't recall ever refusing to try a new experience. Whether it was some new mod, ROM hack, or enhancement to a game, I never felt this kind of apprehension towards it. I embraced it with open arms and enthusiasm. Perhaps all my hang-ups are just my inner purist resisting any change. As if my view of these games hasn't already changed drastically over time as the gaming landscape has evolved and matured. I can be certain of one thing. Embracing randomizers has opened my mind on one of my least liked Metroid entries, allowing me to see its qualities in a way that wasn't previously possible.